Hello everyone, bringing you a video today looking at a recreation of a member of the Falkland Islands Defence Force circa 1982. Now the reason for uploading this video today is to mark the 40th anniversary of the Argentine invasion of the islands, which obviously took place essentially over the night of the 1st to the 2nd of April 1982. So I thought it would be interesting to have a look at some of the kit and equipment here. Thank you very much to the Falkland Islands Defence Force. Obviously the Defence Force is still exists, and I contacted them to ask for a little bit of advice on the kit and equipment that was used at the time, so they provided me some advice on that, and this is also partially based on few but some existing photos from around the time period. So without further ado, we'll get into the main part of the video here and have a look at the recreation and the kit and equipment. You can see the recreation here. Before we get into looking at the details of this, I'll just quickly run through a little bit of history of the Falkland Islands Defence Force. The FIDF was formed initially as the Falkland Islands Volunteers in 1892, and then it's existed from that date until the present day, but for a short period after the Argentine invasion, the FIDF was outlawed and made an illegal organisation, and it was then reinstated after the British victory in the Falklands. So there was that brief period during its history where it didn't exist as an organisation per se. The governor of the Falkland Islands, Rex Hunt, did mobilise the Falkland Islands Defence Force in 1982 on learning of the invasion. However, many members of the FIDF lived remote from the drill hall at Stanley and were therefore not able to respond. Looking at the kit and equipment here, you can see a mix of older uniform with relatively up-to-date British equipment. We're going to run over this in some detail. The most distinctive feature, of course, is the drab beret with the Falkland Islands Defence Force cap badge. We'll get to that in just a moment. The weapon carried is the self-loading rifle, the L1A1. This particular instance has a mix of wooden and plastic furniture, as you can see. The butt is an earlier wooden example, whereas the hand guards, the pistol grip and the carrying handle are all in plastic. This was relatively unusual to see by the early 1980s. It was more common during the 1970s, but it is something that does show up in period photographs from time to time, and I thought I'd include it here. Moving on to talk more about the beret, as you can see, this is a drab wool beret, and it bears the subdued cap badge of the Falkland Islands Defence Force. This is a bronzed example. A bright gilt or anodised version was worn with number 1 dress on the peaked cap, and this subdued example was worn on the beret. The design is essentially the old Falkland Islands coat of arms, with the motto "Desire the Right" around the outer edge. This had been replaced as the actual coat of arms, but the heraldic device had been retained as the cap badge of the Falkland Islands Defence Force when the change was made. The basic uniform consists of a parachutist smock and combat trousers. You can see the parachutist smock here. These were generally provided from Royal Marine stocks, and this is a relatively late production example, a late 60s or early 70s production example of the parachutist smock. The Royal Marines having used these as well prior to the introduction of DPM combat clothing. And this is worn with an older pattern khaki flannel wool shirt underneath. The trousers are quite an antiquated pattern by this point, the old 1960 pattern in OD. And this uniform marks out the FIDF, obviously the predominant camouflage pattern in use by the British Army at this point being DPM, the FIDF still making use of the old parachutist smock and the old 1960 pattern trousers in this instance, so that there would be variations in this. By contrast, the web equipment is essentially up to date. It's a basic set of 1958 pattern in fighting order. You can see the yoke, the belt and the ammunition pouches here. We obviously have the right-hand ammunition pouch with the Energa rifle grenade adapter on the side, and then the left-hand ammunition pouch, and you can see a bayonet is not being carried here. In this instance, the loops on the side of the pouch are empty. On the right hip, a second issue 1958 pattern water bottle pouch is carried, and this of course contains the 1958 pattern water bottle and cup, both in plastic. And then to the rear you can see the rear pouches, or colloquially referred to as kidney pouches, carried above the cape carrier. And the cape carrier is clipped to the bottom of the belt and round to the ammunition pouches, and this of course contains the poncho. In this instance an older 1962 pattern rather than the newer lightweight poncho. Footwear is again up to date. You can see here a pair of DMS ankle boots, that's directly moulded sole. These have a directly moulded rubber sole, and obviously would receive a lot of criticism for their poor performance during the Falklands War. These are worn with ankle puttees, as you can see. So again, looking at the overview of the recreation here, as already said, a mix of older uniform with relatively up-to-date equipment. Obviously the parachutist smock obviously having its origins with the Royal Marines who were stationed on the island, and these were very common to see amongst men of the Falkland Islands Defence Force in the 1970s and the early 1980s, and that's why I've included this here. It was noted by the Falkland Islands Defence Force when I spoke to them that kit and equipment did vary somewhat from man to man, but this is hopefully a relatively representative example. So there we are. I hope you found it interesting looking at this. My thanks once again to the Falkland Islands Defence Force for providing a bit of advice on the kit and equipment that was used at the time. I do hope you found it interesting. As I say, if you have and you'd like to see more of this sort of thing, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can, both Patreon and PayPal, I'll link down below. And as ever, a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, where there will be photographs of this posted, of course, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down below as well. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.